Good morning, Arbor. Good morning, Woodford. Welcome to day 2. My name is Luke and I'll be your MC to bring us into the afternoon. So, I'm sure you're all aware that our next talk, the topic is less plastic, more healthy oceans and people. This panel will explore how we can overcome the barriers at a national, state, local, business and personal level. Facilitating this conversation today is an individual who represents the Boomerang Alliance, who has a key goal of reaching a net zero waste in Australia, but also at a global level. I'm going to leave you on that, and I'd love you to put your hands together for Jeff Angel and his wonderful panel group incoming.
Welcome. Apparently this is being live streamed, so hello, wherever everybody is. I'm Jeff Angel, Director of the Boomerang Alliance. I'd like to first acknowledge the Jinibara people as the traditional custodians of the land where the festival is held, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We do walk on their land and we hope we can care for it together. I'll be giving a brief introduction to the problem and solutions, and then we'll hopefully have an excellent panel discussion. And I'm now going to invite the panel to walk through the curtains. Firstly, Costa Georgiadis, well-known person. Professor Ian Lowe, who is a writer and environmentalist. Uncle Glenn Lowry, poet, artist, performer and Wiradjuri man. And finally, Chris Sherby, who's the site manager at Woodford. Very briefly about the Boomerang Alliance. We were established in 2003 and committed to zero waste in Australia. We began with 10 allies and now we have 55 NGO allies around the nation. We've been involved in many important campaigns, at least that's what we think they are, including container refund schemes which have now spread around all of Australia. And of course, Containers for Change to put your bottles and cans in around Woodford for 10 cents. We have a range of particular foci, reuse, which is also featured here at Woodford, improving Containers for Change. We're only getting about 65% recovery, and also getting rid of single-use plastics. I won't spend too much time on the bad news, but we do have an enormous plastic plague infiltrating the ecosystem and our own bodies. It's long-lasting and accumulating, and the current projections, if we don't do anything about it, is that the production and waste is projected to triple by 2060. There are a whole variety of different types of plastics, big plastics that break up into smaller plastics, deliberately released very small plastics like micro beads and washing clothes fibres. And Australia has one of the worst records of the developed world. We consume over 1 million tonnes of single-use plastic a year. We generate over 2.5 million tonnes. We're understood to be the second highest per capita consumption of single-use plastics. And as the world economy goes towards less carbon-intensive fuels, the big oil companies and their sponsoring nations are also intending to increase the production and consumption of plastic. That's a pretty serious challenge, but we think that the community and the nation and the Boomerang Alliance are up for solving it. Our objective is that Australia becomes one of the least plastic polluted countries on the planet. These big problems obviously require big solutions, and you'd be surprised that there are a whole lot of moves from global to local that are now taking place. And we can act at the global, regional, Pacific, national, state and individual levels. Firstly, and very quickly, the global solution. Many of you would have heard that there have been negotiations for a global plastics treaty. And Australia, to its credit, has joined the high ambition group of 17 nations. That's a pretty good start for what we would like to see internationally. On the slide there, you can see the range of objectives, policy and economic objectives. One, that the treaty is legally binding. Two, that we end plastic pollution by 2040. Thirdly, we reduce primary plastic production. Very controversial with the people we're fighting who want to have more and more plastic production. We increase the circularity of plastic from the beginning of its generation to its disposal end. And that polluters should be held responsible for funding the solutions, whether it's redesign of products, new collection systems, and implementing reuse. Unfortunately, progress has stalled, and Australia and those other 17 nations involved in the high ambition group are considering going it alone. The Pacific, arguably one of the most beautiful oceanic environments on the planet. Australia has contributed to some programs, such as the Plastic Ocean Litter Project and the Anzac Plastics Pact. There's a lot more to do. The countries in the Pacific aren't particularly well developed in terms of recycling and collection, and of course in the circular economy, and we can do enormous amounts to get them on an ecologically sustainable path. In Australia, there's been a lot happening. We did have the National Plastics Plan under the previous coalition government, which did contain many good policies. Much to our surprise, despite all the hoo-ha about its release, very little was done to implement those policies. The only other major instrument up to now is the so-called Australian Packaging Covenant. This is a voluntary industry arrangement, and it has failed every target it has ever set in the last 20 years. In fact, I had the inauspicious pleasure or honour, no, I won't call it an honour, it wasn't an honour, sitting with a bunch of industry people trying not to do anything, on the board of the Packaging Covenant. And it was interesting seeing inside the tent where they were trying everything to avoid regulation and responsibility. When the Albanese government came in, they developed proposals for mandatory regulation of packaging. It's been a 3-year process, and we thought we were very close to getting that instrument legally put in place at the end of last year, but then the whole thing stalled. However, during this whole process of debating plastic pollution, trying to get regulatory arrangements, we've discovered that we now have allies in industry, and the political environment has changed measurably. As you can see, soft plastic stewardship, waste management, resource recovery, APCO, and the Australian Council of Recyclers. This has been a very important political message to government. In the interim, while we're waiting for the national government to do something, the states have been progressively taking quite important actions. They're in the process of banning 24 single-use plastic items. And of course, at Woodford, you can see there is less and less plastic. In fact, I've only come across plastic on cups at the moment, but that's how the rest of Australia is also moving, because governments are banning those single-use items that appear so often in litter and landfill. As I said, we've also got the container refund schemes. This has made a massive difference to the litter caused by plastic bottles and cans, and the level of recycling has skyrocketed. We do have some other proposals, but that's our campaign for next year. New South Wales, don't know what you all think of the Queensland policies, but New South Wales, where I come from, is doing a much better job. They're now going to be requiring, by 2030, all new washing machines supplied to meet a microfiber filter standard. You may not know, but the polyester in our clothes floods through the washing machine, down into the sewerage system and out into the oceans, and one of the most prolific microplastics are those plastic fibres. Food service businesses are to offer reusable cups. A lot of them have been resisting that, but the government says it's going to legislate. They're going to start a reuse-only precinct in the Sydney CBD, and that's a very big exercise given how big Sydney and its commercial and foodware services are. And plastic lids are to be tethered to the containers. This is something that's been happening in Europe, and of course it stops the plastic lids being thrown away and littered. Then there's individual action. I'm sure all of you are being ethically responsible in your use of beverage containers and drink cups and foodware, but we need to mainstream that. So consumers need to buy ethically, and not only as an individually motivated action, but because that's all available because the state governments or the national government has regulated that outcome. We need to use reusables, and on that amplifier there, you see a whole lot of examples gathered from around Australia. And we need to engage with business by asking for better practices, and that means supporting groups like the Boomerang Alliance. Now, we know the public want this. There may have been developed enormous convenience in having throwaway items. We may not have known that the plastic in our clothes and the plastic at various other events and venues was causing such a serious problem, but I think the consciousness is now very high in the community. YouGov poll that we did in 2024 showed that 85% of people are concerned and 65% of people want reusable cups everywhere. One of the things that I'd like our panel to discuss today is how do we overcome the barriers, because none of these changes are easy. Our plastic consumption practices are highly integrated into our economy and lifestyle. vast majority of people. We have a number of campaigns: the Reuse Revolution, 30% reusable packaging by 2030, 100% reuse cups. We want the mandatory regulation of the packaging sector put in place next year. We'd like to see national and state microplastic reduction strategies to embrace all of those different types of microplastics that are now getting into us. We'd like to see the expansion of container refund schemes, including doubling the refund to 20 cents. I should tell you, and if there are any politicians here, Queensland opposes this. We'd like to see more eligible containers and refund points. Soft plastics, the collections that you made at home and took to the supermarket are, of course, that was stopped due to the collapse of RedCycle. That scheme now needs to be made broad scale and compulsory. We want to crack down on greenwash, and we're continuing to work with the Australian Marine Conservation Society on auditing supermarkets' use of plastics. So, we're now going to move on to the panel and find out what their thoughts are, what their solutions are, and what the barriers are. And while we're at it, here are 2 QR codes that you can help us take political action. Thank you. So I have a number of questions for the panel. We may be able to leave a little bit of time at the end for your questions, but we'll see how we go. So starting off with Chris, I'd like to ask you, what are the worst plastic pollution and waste that you've seen?
I'm only going to talk to the Woodford Folk Festival part of this today, and thanks for the introduction. I guess for us, and one of the key things that we're working on at the moment is Tetra Paks. I heard you use the word greenwashing, which is a really important part of this conversation today, and we're going to have to be a little bit bold about that because there's a belief system out there. And I've definitely, we organisationally have copped a lot of pressure about not having the yellow lidded bins everyone might notice in the festival grounds, and there's a very good reason for that, is because there really isn't anything to recycle. It's quite simple, really. We do the refundables. We're working on our cardboard collection and as much as we can, but the Tetra Paks, the alternative milks and the plastic milk jugs, no good.
Glenn.
Thank you. I guess from my point of view as an Aboriginal person, the difficulties that we see is the fact that many of our communities live in places with don't have potable water. Water isn't clean. So in the end, as a result of that, whole communities rely on bottled water. And that was a major issue that came out during the breakdown of the rivers in 2019. Places like Wilkenya, etc., had to rely on water brought in by bottles. That became an ongoing process for many of our communities, because even though in some places the water is appropriate to eat, it doesn't smell like it, feel like it, look like it, and all the rest of it. So for us in our communities, one of the big things is how do we make sure that our communities have potable water, the kind of things that we're used to having in the city, and so that they no longer need to rely on bottled water. And the other issue is that rivers are impacted by things that are used in the building trade, the fine fibres that come off, the materials used in modern building, which end up in the river, which end up in our fish, which end up out under our trees, which end up in our bodies. And the breakdown for us as an Aboriginal communities across Australia is that when the water's bad, the water's sick, we're sick. So one of the key things with this, I will say something, Jeff, one of the important things about it is don't refer to us as traditional custodians. The Jinnabara are the contemporary, the brains trust of what is good for this land. And we must remember they're the continuing, contemporary custodians.
Ian.
We know that there's three ways you can change people's behaviour: education, regulation and financial incentives. At the moment, the financial incentives are, to be blunt, pathetic. I mean, 10 cents container deposit legislation. I mean, I don't want to reveal my age, but when I was a kid, the deposit on a soft drink bottle was enough to buy an ice cream. And no bottle ever hit the street. There were 3 kids diving to grab it to be the one who could take it to the shop and get an ice cream cone. So if we were adopting that principle, the container deposit would be $2 or $3, $5, not 10 cents and maybe 20. Secondly, we don't charge people for throwing stuff away. I saw a t-shirt today, don't throw it away, there is no away. There is no away. And the community subsidises by millions of dollars a year burying plastic waste, as if we wanted to encourage people to throw stuff away so that we could fill holes with plastic and put a bit of dirt over the top of it. And future generations, I think, will think, didn't you realise that petroleum was actually a precious resource? You burn it, you're so keen to get rid of it, you fuel vehicles and drive them around in circles just to see which one can go the fastest, or turn it into plastic and throw it away after 5 minutes. We should, as responsible citizens, as responsible temporary custodians, we should regard that as a finite resource which, if we use it, should be turned into semi-permanent objects with a long lifetime, rather than objects that are thrown away. Finally, we need to recognise that industry in the final analysis will only do the right thing if they are forced to do so. It's like Winston Churchill's famous comment about the USA. He said, you can always rely on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. And industry have been promising to do the right thing since I was in nappies, and they still haven't done it. Now, one of the definitions of insanity is to keep doing what you've done and expect a different result. In the final analysis, they will only have a responsible use to plastic if they are forced to do so, and that means we have to regulate.
Yeah, we might come to that in a minute. Costa, what's the worst pollution you've seen before we get on to optimistic stuff?
Yeah. I just want to say thanks, Uncle. Look, we come to Woodford, we stop, we slow down, and then we get a chance to reframe. And you're reframing with one word. Like, that is my takeaway already for the festival, and I've only just started day 2. So thank you for that. And I think what Jeff and really, like, that's a... And we don't understand, or we take for granted that we use language, and language frames reality. It comes true, and if we keep saying it over and over, it will happen. So if we say a new narrative, well, we'll drive change. But I think, and on that topic, from a framing point of view, like, this is all about aperture. Everything Jeff talked about was like where we tap in at an individual level, where we tap in at a local or a community or a state or a federal, but then a global level. But what I saw in a community level, I mean a micro community level that was global, was to go, I went, last year there was a conference with 500 land and sea rangers, and it was at the Gama site in Yirrkala, and we went out onto beaches in northeast Arnhem Land, and I'm telling you, you're driving on a 4-wheel drive down a track that the branches were generously wiping your face within the vehicle in the middle seat. It was that tight, right? You got to those beaches and there was plastic this thick, and they'd removed it a month and a half, 2 months before, and we got there and it was back again. So that's that global reality that we need to think about every time we make a purchase, because we're contributing to that. And there was stuff up there that had come from Indonesia, stuff that had come from Asia, stuff that had joined the other gyre, because the gyre is something out there that we know about. But until you go to a remote beach, so remote that barely anyone's, you'll never go there in your lifetime, and you see plastic. But then what's the challenge? How do you deal with it? How do you get rid of it? There's no semi-trailer going in there. It's got to come out. How's it come out? And then where do we take it? We drive more trucks using more fuel to carry processed fuel to a place to reprocess it, and what feel good about the fact that we're welcoming foreign garbage. So I want to frame that. And the other one, Tangaroa Blue, do amazing work cleaning beaches up north in Cairns. And I remember being on a beach there, and someone's parking fine in North Sydney Council was on a beach 100 kilometres north of Cairns, right? That's the world we live in. So don't park illegally, for starters. You know, that's that framing, like right down to the micro level of, I'm in a hurry. Why are you in a hurry? Well, you didn't organise your day enough. Get up a bit earlier so you don't get fined to have a plastic fine that's going to end up on a beach in a turtle in Cairns or something.
Costa, I hope you sent it back to them.
Yeah, it did. Well, unfortunately, the ink had come off, but there was enough to see North Sydney Council. But so that's the worst plastic pollution I've seen in the big picture. Full stop.
Thanks. Ian, I mean, you've been involved in policy making, and I think you were the president of the ACF for a while.
Guilty as charged.
So what are the main political and economic barriers we're facing? Because, you know, any sensible person, we shouldn't be polluting the planet and ourselves with plastic, but it keeps happening.
Well, the main thing is political timidity and the pernicious influence of corporate donations. Politicians basically want to be re-elected, and they don't want to offend generous donors like large corporations. And so they're very good at announcing policies and very bad at implementing them. I remember 30 years ago I was on a national body, the National Greenhouse Advisory Panel, which was giving advice to the then Keating government about how we respond to climate change. And in March 1996, the Howard government was elected, and they asked us to comment on the government's climate response strategy. And we didn't put it quite as politely as this, but we said the policy is actually very good. It'd be nice if it were implemented. We were never asked to meet again for giving that unwelcome advice. Governments, unless the community puts pressure on them, will always try and appease their corporate donors, because they don't give money to political parties out of generosity, out of philanthropy. In fact, if they did, if they were giving money to political parties and getting nothing in return, their shareholders would be entitled to ask pointed questions at the annual general meeting. Why are you pissing our money up against the wall, giving it to political parties and getting nothing in return? Now, if you think they get nothing in return, I've got a harbour bridge I'd like to sell you if you meet me in the shed afterwards. Of course they're getting something in return. That the politicians are unwilling to bite the hand that feeds them. So I think if there's one thing we could do to improve politics, it would be to ban corporate donations. But since there's probably bipartisan agreement not to do that, what we need to do is ensure that the community pressure is a countervailing force to encourage politicians. And the good thing, I guess, is that after the last two elections, any politician who can do takeaway sums and read joined-up writing would have concluded that there is now no such thing as a safe seat. When seats like Warringah and Kooyong, that have been Liberal since before the Boer War, are lost to independents campaigning for more action on climate change, Any politician knows that they are susceptible to community campaigns. So our job is to scare the living bejesus out of elected politicians and make it clear that if they don't respond with decent action, we'll chuck them out and elect people who will.
We'll add that to our campaign objectives. Glenn, you know, you come from a different, let's call it, people ecosystem. How can your people be helped to get rid of the plastic pollution that they're suffering from?
In a little way, we have to do just what Ian said in terms of politicians in the areas that are affecting Aboriginal people. We saw after the referendum the great walk back by Australian political parties from Aboriginal justice. Australia, and I've written heavily on this, Australia is incapable of doing justice for Aboriginal people because Australia is all about the land, not about the people, and they never want to give the land back, because to do so would mean they'd have to give up privilege and entitlement. So we need to find ways to allow them, hopefully through things like the Victorian Treaty, where local Aboriginal bodies begin to have sovereignty over their decision making and over matters that affect them, then we'll begin to have much more capability to do the things that we need to do for ourselves. We have no say over how the money is spent in most of those remote communities, or the communities without water, the communities that are living on rivers. It comes through NGOs, it comes through government funding, and it has all kinds of things attached to it. We need to be left to be able to use what we have to develop strategies that we know will work in the spaces that we are in. And there is a connection between those people in the centre of Australia and those people on the edge. You know, because there are only two types of Aboriginal people, basically. There's freshwater people and saltwater people. We define ourselves by where we are near water. That is the significant thing about who we are. We have to talk to the corporations and stop them from dragging out of the rivers ridiculous amounts of water at no cost to them. I mean, in places in Australia, an agricultural farm can get water to feed their 500,000 cows, but an Aboriginal family have to pay water rates to get water to feed their family. So we need to change those kind of policies, put back the sovereignty for Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people have one ethic, only one ethic. It's called the custodial ethic. Respect, responsibility and reciprocity. And we offer that to you because respect is about how you respect yourself in your relationship to your other self, which is the earth, your family and everybody else. And how do you want to be remembered as living out the vocation of respect and care? You have responsibility to make the big decisions in your own life and in your own communities. And if you do so, mother, out of which we are born, will flourish. And if that happens, we will flourish too.
Thank you. So, Chris, Woodford's a living example of better responsibility on single use and having reuse. Would you like to tell us about, well, how it came about and the barriers and the marketing issues and believing what the suppliers tell you, etc.?
Yeah, well, I guess we come from a pretty privileged place at Woodfordia, the Woodford Folk Festival, that we have a very active patronage here that really care about waste and plastic. So, you know, at the beginning, you know, we've got a bunch of people around us that want to see something better happen here. So we don't need to be encouraged, we just need to listen to what our patrons say and act on it. I think I had a conversation with someone yesterday saying that, you know, we banned plastic cups from single use. I think it was around the early 2000s. So we've been doing this a long time. We've got 90,000 cups sitting in a shipping container all year. I've been to many events and offered up these cups for them to use. I've been to concerts with my partner and you know, in areas where we have events on, and they have events happening all the time, and they're still pouring from bloody cans into single-use cups. It's so frustrating when a little organisation like us can go to the effort and just reduce that one thing out of our organisation. So everybody here, no, I haven't heard anyone grumble about paying $3 for that cup and then seeing it returned and washed and back the next year. So it's an easy one for us. Our next challenge now is to work on the cutlery and the knives and the forks. Shout out to anybody that has used the new wash station out in front of the chai tent. So that's our first little foray into having a go at that, which is really wonderful. That has been a really challenging thing for us to work on, because there's a little bit of pressure on us about, you know, keeping it clean, and the questions about disinfection and going to all these efforts. Are people going to take care of it? And of course they're taking care of it, because everybody that wants to use it wants to see it clean, and they all want to get rid of the plates and the cups. So, you know, I did a run through with the garbology team this morning, and I cannot believe, and I couldn't, you know, begin to have people appreciate just how little waste we've had this event, even up until today. It is unbelievable. We think we've done some estimates based on the cup washing regime that we have on site, and we have reduced single-use plastic drinking cups. We think somewhere in the order of magnitude of 350 to 420,000 per year.
So there's one thing, there are a lot of products described as reusable or recyclable on the market. So how did you choose the best ones?
This is a hard one to talk to without rubbing a few people up. The greenwashing space is a very tricky one to talk to, and obviously the Tetra issue that I touched on earlier is a really hard one to get through, because I don't know if anyone out there believes it, but they're just not recyclable. You know, the only thing that we're doing is putting it into a co-mingle bin along with the other milk bottles, which en masse is just unbelievably huge. I mean, in the co-mingle bin, just so everyone's aware, is 7 tonnes of waste. It is absolutely nothing. It's crazy. You know, like, out of an event this size, getting something like in the order of 60 to 70 tonnes of waste to only send 7 tonnes of co-mingle away is just absurd. But I had a look this morning, and we've changed our contractor this year to do the waste. Shout out to TBM, who are doing an amazing job on site with our garbology team. We actually, this is the first year we've not had a massive truck with, you know, forklifts and security escorting through the site, crashing and banging while people are walking around with their yoga mats, getting their cup of coffee in the morning. We have one little truck with a crew going around, and they're consolidating all of the waste in small bins. That was a huge risk for us this year, was to admit to ourselves, if we put the big bins out, people will fill them. So let's not do it. Let's put little bins out, stow a few little bins away, and see how it works out. And it's like, up until today, touch wood, it is working out fantastic. So
Great. Costa, the governments are banning a whole lot of single-use items. What's been your observation of how people have responded to that?
It's always good, isn't it? It's like I'm online. You're on mute, you numpty. It's interesting, because I think the big current under all of this is convenience. And whether you talk to industry, whether you talk to business, whether you talk to family under the pump, selecting their food at their choice of food provider, it's convenience, right? We're kind of on this treadmill, and we want things, well, let me reframe that. We're told we want these things fast and easy. And that's, to me, the real balancing point, because we can't take on convenience, because then you're going right into people's, perspective on life. Like, you've got to go in there carefully and provide motivation rather than dictation. Because once you start dictating, people are going to push back more than ever before, because people are being told what to do everywhere, and online they're telling people what to do as well. If you've got an opinion, let it rip. So what we need to think about is the idea of, rather than just standing in front of that, saying, how do we make these alternatives convenient? Like, we don't have to change that language for the sake of a troubled road. So I see something, and it ties up with what you had the slide up there, but a town called Bermagui have implemented a wonderful program. And why I like this is because it's a small town on the south coast of New South Wales, on the Sapphire Coast, and it's a diamond, this place. But it's implementing this system because it's a small example, and they're saying, all right, all the cafes are going to implement these cups. Simple, done, and plates for takeaway, containers for takeaway. Think about how many people and how much people are getting food delivered these days. That's a bigger problem, right? Because culturally, we're moving down that convenience road, and as a result, that's driving this plastic. So when I see something like that, and then that ties in, and you say, well, yes, that could be done in a district of the CBD. But that requires all levels of buy-in. It requires you and me. It requires the businesses. And we do need policy. As you were saying, this idea that business will sort it out, you're dreaming. It ain't going to happen, because they're going to go for the bottom line, right? And I'm not saying that's bad. That's the reality of business. But this idea that, we're over-regulation, no, there's some things that have to be regulated. Otherwise, they won't be implemented. So when we can create a step-by-step process like this, and it reminds me of a lot of the good work, and there's some great work being done by Zero Waste Victoria, who are confronting the supermarkets and saying, what is going on here? And when you want that change, it has to start there, but it also has to start with modular systems on the ground that we drive up, and then that policy and advocacy and hardcore mongrel politicking and individual action at that level implements down and up the chain. And that's the stuff that I'm seeing. People rattling the cage upstairs, but then also we have to have action. Like, we can't just talk. As you said, there's all these great policies, and we get in the photo and we say, look at this, there's the policy. But at the same time, we're saying, well, the policy's been there for 6 months, why haven't you done anything? Hello, current moment. Yeah, but it takes time, right? So we've got to action things and be more mongrel about it at every level. And that means behaviour assessment. And don't take it as a negative, take it as an opportunity, I reckon.
Glenn?
I was going to comment, and one of the things that Costa and Ian both said, it's about trying to get corporations to behave themselves. Who's here's got a super fund? There's power there. Your super funds invest in corporations that make money. They invest in the kind of corporations that are resisting the decision making that Ian and Costa are talking about. And we need to find the fact that we're benefiting from their investment in those corporations. We, in fact, if we want to be particular, are shareholders in those corporations. Therefore, what we have the opportunity to do at all levels of our engagement with our super funds, and if you don't know who they are, because your boss might just stick it away, find out, talk to them, write to them, go to their annual general meetings. bring pressure to bear so that they only invest in those corporations who are making efforts in the fields that we want to get change in. It's people power that changes this, as well as the political power at the top. We know that governments will do if they think their power is being threatened. We know corporations will do if we think their profit-making process is being impacted. So as shareholders, through your investment, your superannuation fund, you have power. Write some letters. Maybe that's another policy that we need to give to Boomerang to work on. How do we bring those places and those people together?
Yep. So, yep.
We've given those two organisations the power because we continue to go back there, and then we go, oh well, it's easy. So we go. It means a bit of disturbance as well. If we disturb our buying habits and actually say, well, what if I were to find the grower, buy a box of carrots, buy a box of this, buy a box of that, buy a box of this, and make our own little co-op with my neighbours in my street, then we pull that power back and we reduce that constriction of choice. And then you don't have all that plastic. So, you know, these are some of the options. And that's not saying, oh, you are having to shoulder this. But if you want to change something, it will require a bit of disturbance because we're on the Happy Red Cordial. It's easy. Come and get it. It's plastic wrapped. It's all safe for your convenience. You know, it's like, really, it's the same thing. It reminds me of when you go to a hotel and it's got that wrapper over it, says hermetically soiled for your convenience over the toilet. Like, you know, it's the same wrapper that's been put back on. You know,
Don't tell them that.
we fall for this convenience thing, but there's so many ways we can unpack it, and that's just one. There's not enough time to go into it, but when you think collectively, we can back out and drive down new roads of opportunity.
So I'm going to ask one more question of all of the panel, and there might be a little bit of time if you want to shout out a question. This might be a little bit difficult for you, Chris, but if there were some environment ministers here today, what would you say to them to get Australia on the path of stopping plastic pollution? Go on, go for it.
Oh, I mean, I think we've got to start at something, you know, quite achievable to start off with. I mean, you can't objectively the way Woodfordia thinks is that what's the thing that we can do next that's not going to be too much of a stretch for us to solve. You know, I'll talk to the local issues and the local things that we do. Like, we put a wash station in. Like, we tortured ourselves over doing something so small, and everyone would say, well, why did you do that? And it's like, well, you need a hot water system and you need cleaning equipment and you need all this stuff. It's really small, but if you went and did it 12 times across the festival site, how would you monitor that? Like, you're thinking about something that's small and you want to change it and you want to make a big difference. Policy almost feels like that. It's almost like you say, well, let's go and stop the milk industry from putting milk into bloody plastic cartons straight away. Just do that. Why not go back to the way they used to do it with having a glass milk bottle with a piece of foil on top? Do you know what I mean? Like, isn't there something out there where we can let's just make a little bit of a difference, see if we can get something that, you know, the containers for change, the reclaimers was almost like low-hanging fruit. It was so simple to put in place, like you're saying, Ian. It's monetised. People are making an effort in it. I mean, it's somewhere between, I think COEX said, for one wheelie bin of 10-cent refundables, I think we're somewhere between, I think it's 90 and 170 items in a bin. I mean, by the time you put that in your car and you drive it down to the reclaimers and you get you get $10 for it and you're standing there trying to do this thing, it's like, well, the Woodford Folk Festival has captured over 260,000 items in the last 3 and a bit years, which is extraordinary. You can see that money, that $26,000, which is not very much for the amount of effort that this team goes in to collect it, you can see that money put around the festival site. All the greenery, all the plants, all the revegetation, we're putting that money back in. Society needs to see that benefit. So the one thing that we want to change, and I'm going to put it out there today, because I have rang the milk companies, I've rang our main milk distributor that delivers milk to all these coffees and chais on site, and I asked them, how can we change that one thing? And they said, you can put a big bladder in and a tank and but you have to disinfect it every few hours. You need to do this, you need to do this. I get roadblocks all the time. But if we went and said to the politician, can we just mandate that the milk industry now needs to make fundamental change? We need to go back to where we went when I was a kid as well with the glass milk bottles and just do that thing.
Can I pick up on that?
Yes.
As I was living in the UK in the 1970s when they basically moved from doorstep delivery of milk, which was in glass bottles, and the milko put the full bottle down and took the empty bottle away, to getting milk from supermarkets. And supermarkets were too bloody lazy to look after milk bottles, and supermarkets said we want it in plastic containers. A responsible environment minister would say milk cannot be sold in plastic containers. Milk can only be sold in glass bottles. And an average glass bottle made 30 trips. An average plastic bottle makes 1 trip.
Yep.
And that is criminally irresponsible.
Okay. Glenn, got a quick message for environment ministers.
My quick message comes from my father, which says, walk your country, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear what your country needs you to do and what you need to do and respond to it. What he's saying is, get out of your offices, talk to the people, listen to the impact of what you're doing, and listen to the people who want to see our planet survive, who want to do and make changes. And above all, don't make dust. Don't rush to decisions that are going to impact us like Ian was talking about. I mean, I think both Ian and I go back to the times when we didn't even have milk bottles, we just had cows. And I'd like to bring those days back. But what I want to say to them is, get out and talk to your people. Talk to the people. Don't listen to your advisors. Don't listen to the people with vested interests in what you do from a profit point of view. Listen to the people who have vested interests from a life flourishing point of view.
Thank you. Ian.
Minister, you're the Environment Minister. Your job is to protect the environment. Every indicator is going south. You ain't doing your job, mate. Get off your ass and do it.
I hope you don't mind us using that in our campaign material. Costa, what would you like to say?
There's an entire network of environment groups like Total Environment Centre or Series on my T-shirt here, or they're all over every state. The Arid Lands Environment Centre in Alice, NT Environment Centre. There's all of these, and then you've got the Australian Association of Environmental Educators. You've got the Early Childhood Environmental Educators. These people are on the ground in communities growing the change. We need to put real price value on education, and that education needs to come locally by the faces. So it's the faces of local people in the campaigns representing their community and saying, hey, at the local surf club, at the local football club, in the CWA, in the men's shed and the women's shed and all that. We need those people. We need proper funding for education, because the ground up can rip the control from the top down. And I think supporting those networks of educators is what I want to see you do as an Environment Minister.
Thank you.
can I add?
Are we allowed to ask a question?
Sorry, can I add one thing?
Oh, yes.
Local authorities can make a difference. I want to shout out to Noosa Shire Council, where Councillor Amelia Lawrenson proposed and the council has accepted there will be no use of single-use coffee cups in the Shire of Noosa. Costa mentioned Bermagui. I mean, Australia is a patchwork of local authorities, and local authorities do have control over what's done on their patch.
Yep.
And if they change, then the big corporations have to respond.
Okay, maybe a couple of questions.
Alleged to be because of plastic pollution, particularly sperm counts, not only in humans but also alligators and various other things, and various other changes which appear to be gender related to endocrine disruption.
Yeah, no, you're entirely right. I mean, our science isn't good enough to know all of the consequences of plastic pollution. But what we know is, as I mentioned, every significant environmental indicator is going south. We are losing biodiversity at a rate comparable with the 5 previous great extinction episodes on the planet. And in the end, that will bite us in the bum because we depend on the natural environment for breathable air, drinkable water, the capacity to produce our food, and the spiritual refreshment we get from natural areas. So the fundamental duty of governments at all levels is to maintain the integrity of natural systems. And until we know it's safe to throw something away, it's irresponsible to be throwing it away.
Okay. Oh, God. Fellow at the front there.
I've recently heard on the ABC, so it must be true, that 46% of our microplastics are coming off our tyres. So it's already micro and heading for nano. What can we do about that one?
Yeah, that's a gigantic issue. And not only is it coming off tyres, when they install artificial grass sports fields, they put rubber crumb on the grass. There's very embryonic attention being paid to it by the industry, but I'm not aware of anything that's going to get on top of it soon.
There's actually some good work being done. I don't know how advanced rain gardens are here in Queensland, but I know in New South Wales and particularly in Victoria and Melbourne, I've worked with some councils down there. Rain gardens are where you see the gutter kind of divert and then there's a car space that's lower down and there's plants in there, and that's basically a detention pond, but it's also a filtration basin, and that captures all of that road detritus, be it the microplastics, be it the dog poo, be it the oil, and all those things. And we've got a trial going on in Newcastle at the moment, which excites me no end, because basically the benchtop composting system, that food waste that's being turned, so your scraps are being turned into food waste, so from food waste into compost, and then they're using the compost in the layers so that water gets filtered through your compost. So imagine if every street you knew that your compost was filtering the water that was going into the creek or into the river or into the lake. So there's good work being done in that space by CORE, the Centre for Organic Research and Education in International Compost Awareness Week. Look them up and there's stuff happening there.
Okay, we've run out of time, but I'm sure if the panel are going to stick around a bit, you can ask them some questions. So I'd like very much to thank Chris, Glenn, Ian and Costa. And let's make Australia plastic pollution free.
Once again, thank you very much, Jeff, Costa, Uncle Glenn, Chris and Ian. You can catch Ian back here tomorrow at the same time, as well as Costa around the festival all week. Just to remind you folks, Jeff is here on behalf of the Boomerang Alliance, and that's something you can look up. Thank you. When you get the chance. On the topic, Woodford does have reusable cups. They can be used